Good evening and welcome back to a joint meeting of the Burbank City Council with the Successor Agency, Housing Authority, Parking Authority, and Youth Endowment Services Fund Board on Tuesday, January 13th, 2026. Today's study session item is an update on the status of the Burbank Neighborhood Specific Plan development process. I welcome Greg Mirzaavakian, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department, to please present the report. Welcome and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Takahashi and members of the City Council. My name is Greg Mirzaavakian, and I'm a Senior Planner with the CDD Planning Department and the Co-Project Manager for the Burbank Rancho Neighborhood Specific Plan Project, also known as the RNSP. I also have with me Principal Planner Amanda Landry, Co-Project Manager, Senior Transportation Planner Chris Bonomo, as well as members of the DUDEC team, and they are the consultants for the project. Tonight I'll be providing the Council with a status report on the RNSP and the next steps. The project team will also be taking the Council's input on the emerging themes and objectives identified for the project. Tonight we will cover the material that you see on the screen. This is the outline for the presentation. The Rancho neighborhood consists of two non-contiguous parts located at the southwest end of Burbank across approximately 315 acres and is home to about 3,800 residents. There are approximately 1,450 residential units in the neighborhood, with slightly more renters than homeowners at 52%. The larger East Rancho is generally centered along Alameda Avenue and Riverside Drive, bounded by Keystone Street and Victory Boulevard. I'm sorry. Probably got stuck. I apologize. So the West Rancho is the smaller neighborhood bounded by the LA River and Riverside Drive, South California Street, and Bob Hope Drive. The Rancho is a unique area that represents a rare example of an equestrian neighborhood nestled in the urban Southern California landscape. The Rancho is specifically designated within the city of Burbank to allow horsekeeping and equestrian-related uses grounded in its proximity to the LA Equestrian Center and Griffith Park. Geographically, the Rancho is strategically situated. Its proximity to prominent movie studios such as Disney and Warner Brothers provides a convenient location for entertainment industry professionals. These images show a neighborhood marked by a mixture of low and medium density residential and local and regional commercial uses. Just to point out some observations here. The commercial structures in the Rancho are primarily 1 to 2 stories in height. Some of the residential sections in the Rancho do not have sidewalks. There are existing horse crossings throughout this neighborhood, and the majority of development along Alameda consists of medium-density multifamily housing. Riverside Drive, Alameda, and Main Street have dedicated standard bicycle lanes. Now for a little bit of history of land use regulations in the Rancho. The first horsekeeping regulations were adopted in 1950, which required a permit for the keeping of horses. This was followed by the adoption of the H overlay for the single-family zones in 1964. As development pressures increased, the city initiated efforts in the 90s to preserve the Rancho's unique character. The draft Rancho Commercial Recreation Master Plan was released in 1992, and this plan was never adopted, but its core elements were incorporated in the Neighborhood Protection Plan, which focuses on traffic mitigation, Neighborhood Identity Plan, which focused on streetscape and signage, the General Plan land use amendments for 7 sub-areas, which then were tailored into the Rancho Master Plan zoning regulations to effectuate those designations. And these designations reflect the commercial zoning that continues to this day. In 2023, Council directed staff to pursue the specific plan for the Rancho neighborhood. DUDEC was selected as the project consultant following a competitive bid process, and the project kicked off in November of 2024. Now let's take a look at the trends in horsekeeping and registration in the Rancho over the past 20 years. This map shows all the properties since 2006 that have had or still have a registered horse in blue. 24 of these, shown in dark blue, have current horse registrations for 30 horses. The red outlines show properties that have current or past requests for manure pickup. The total number of properties with any equestrian activity on record since 2006 is 132, and the highest number of horses during this period was 171. However, due to underreporting, the true number is likely higher. It should also be noted that approximately 90 horses are kept at the LA Equestrian Center, registered to about 50 Burbank residents. However, we don't have data on who those owners are. And this one is a snapshot from last year. So there were 30 registered horses in 2025 and 23 properties with manure pickup requests. So 28% of all properties that have registered horses or manure pickup since 2006 are currently registered with horses or have manure pickup requests. And this trend represents a sharp decline over the past 2 decades. However, as you can see, these do not neatly overlap, suggesting there's a gap in data and a lack of registration. The project team continues to collect data from various sources to have a more accurate census of equine presence in the rancho. It is critical for the city to have this data for emergency preparedness, since knowing the location of horses can help to send emergency response personnel to these locations to help with any evacuation efforts. The project team also looked at the historic aspects of the rancho. Dudek subconsultant South Environmental prepared a draft rancho neighborhood-specific plan historic context statement that documents the equestrian history of the Burbank rancho. This document includes a detailed analysis of the themes related to equestrian development, residential growth, film industry connections, and architectural evolution, as well as a reconnaissance-level survey of 911 properties. And this report also evaluates the rancho for eligibility as a historic district. The draft statement concludes that Burbank Rancho does not meet the criteria for historic district designation. Despite its meaningful equestrian past, the evidence that once expressed this identity has been diminished. Loss of stables, alterations to residential properties, demolition of equestrian facilities, limited visibility of remaining infrastructure, and a lack of architectural cohesion prevent the neighborhood from achieving the integrity required for historic district eligibility under the National Register criterion. Despite this, individual properties may still be eligible for historic district designation. Existing mobility conditions were also extensively studied and collected. Equestrian counts were conducted at 11 locations in the rancho. The counts captured equestrians riding on horseback as well as those walking their horse. The busiest intersections by far were dedicated equestrian paths in and around the Mariposa Street Bridge, as well as the LA Equestrian Center during the weekend count. The image here represents only a weekend peak hour volume collected in August of last year. Equestrian circulation activity in and around the rancho is primarily associated with the LA Equestrian Center, rental horse facilities, and access to Griffith Park over the Mariposa Street Bridge. This slide represents the pedestrian counts taken at 18 locations in the rancho. The busiest intersections were along Alameda, as well as several intersections along Riverside. This is a representative of a typical weekday morning. This was taken on a Wednesday. Again, this number signifies the peak hour count only. It should be noted that there is a larger number of streets in this plan area. There's a large number that do not have sidewalks. However, this was not singled out as a major concern by the community. This slide is depicting the bicycle counts that were taken at the same intersections, and it shows the weekday morning counts and the peak number of peak hour volume at each intersection. Unsurprisingly, these counts suggest that the highest volumes of bicycles use the routes that have existing bicycle infrastructure. The busiest intersections for bicyclists were along Riverside Drive, parts of which have a dedicated Class 2 bike lane. And the Rancho currently has Class 2 bike lanes along Alameda, Main Street, and Riverside. This slide shows the equestrian infrastructure and facilities in and around the Rancho. The existing road crossings on Riverside are currently equipped with equestrian crosswalk buttons. There are 7 intersections in the Rancho fully or partially equipped with equestrian crosswalk buttons. There are two intersections on Riverside which do not have a pedestrian or equestrian crossing, and those are marked with a red star on the map before you. The LA Equestrian Center is shown here in a cross-hatched green color, and this facility provides access to established equestrian trails in the vicinity. There are 3 points of entry into the LA Equestrian Center from the city of Burbank, and these are shown with the black stars on the map. The Mariposa Street Bridge, built in 1939, is an equestrian and pedestrian bridge that is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and serves as the only equestrian crossing over the LA River. The project team has developed an understanding of Burbank's equestrian history and existing conditions through multiple interviews, site visits, and consultations with respected equestrian experts, including Ms. Jean Gilbert, the chair of Preserve Atwater Rancho. One major conclusion that the project team has drawn from all of this is that safety, specifically equine safety, stands out as one of the major and primary concerns related to mobility in the Rancho. An analysis of the existing regulations across multiple jurisdictions revealed that the purpose of equine regulations has historically been to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community. This is true for both Burbank regulations as well as those outside of Burbank. Moving forward, health, safety, and welfare will continue to be major considerations for the development of land use regulations and will guide staff's policy recommendations. This project will strive to ensure compatibility between existing land uses, horsekeeping and riding, as well as other transportation modes, including walking, bicycling, and driving. The project team has also surveyed potential best practices in equestrian trail design through the review of 7 equestrian communities across California. Among other findings, the survey revealed that off-road trails are the safest option. Noteworthy were the policies in Rolling Hills Estates and Woodside, both of which emphasize that bicycle and equestrian trail uses are generally incompatible and should therefore be kept as separate facilities. These communities therefore emphasize that while equestrian trails can be located near other modes of travel, they are generally safer when physically separated. All horse trails, even fully separated ones, involve the crossing of paved roads. Here, equestrian crossing infrastructure is recommended. Such measures include equestrian crossing signs and marked crosswalks to alert drivers, as well as rapid flashing beacons to increase pedestrian visibility at crossings where pedestrians can activate these lights via push button. So this technology can also be used for equestrian crossings. The RNSP team has conducted outreach since at least the spring of 2025, with more outreach planned for each future step of the project. The website was launched in April of 2025, and it contains information about the project, a history portal, a news page, frequently asked questions, and a newsletter sign-up. It is updated regularly with events, project materials, and resources. Community engagement has been strong, with approximately 250 individuals signed up on the mailing list as of December of 2025, and 2 community events attended by over 170 participants, respectively. Staff has also conducted individual interviews with 10 stakeholders and conducted site visits to horsekeeping properties. The first community event was held on the morning of May 10, 2025, with two locations, one in the East Rancho at Mountain View Park and one in the West Rancho at Buena Vista Park. Additional checkpoints were provided along approximately 1 mile long self-guided walking routes in each half of the neighborhood. The purpose of this event was to allow residents to share firsthand observations, highlight neighborhood strengths and challenges, and inform the planning process through immersive, self-guided participation. A total of 115 participants signed in across both routes. A more extensive list of findings from the event is included in Attachment 7, but the biggest takeaways were that residents value the Rancho's unique equestrian, small-town character and want safer mobility options, improved crossings, better trail conditions, and thoughtful management of future development. The second community event was a pop-up style event on August 2nd at the Rancho Marketplace. The second event attracted approximately 70 participants. The purpose of this event was to engage residents and visitors in conversations about the non-residential areas of the Rancho, to understand how they use commercial corridors and gather input on future commercial needs. The event aimed to create an accessible, informal opportunity for participation, enabling community members to share experiences and aspirations related to mobility, public space, amenities, and neighborhood identity. Feedback highlighted West Riverside Drive and West Alameda Avenue as the neighborhood's primary commercial corridors, well used but in need of improved walkability, safer crossings, especially for equestrians, and more pedestrian-friendly shopping destinations. Residents expressed clear interest in small, locally owned businesses, including cafes, casual dining, and boutique shops, and suggested potential redevelopment sites such as the AAA site and the Technicolor Credit Union building. Feedback across both events emphasized preserving neighborhood identity while enhancing walkability, public spaces, and access to small, locally focused businesses. Through a review of community feedback, existing conditions, and best planning practices, the project team identified 6 major themes to assist the future development of the project alternatives, design guidelines, and implementation programs. Specific actions for these themes were identified, and they're included in Attachment 8 to the staff report. 6 themes were identified. They are public realm, mobility, horsekeeping, change and growth, citywide role, and identity. For public realm, the objective is to provide a variety of spaces and places to meet the community's needs. Here is the vision. Burbank Rancho's public realm will offer safe and varied experiences to match the diverse needs of its residents, workers, and visitors. Mobility. The objective is to make it easier and safer to get around the Rancho for all modes, ages, and abilities. The vision for this theme is that the Burbank Rancho will offer a safe, comfortable, and accessible network of streets, sidewalks, trails, pathways, and other connections for all modes of travel, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, transit users, and equestrians. Horsekeeping. The objective is to establish Burbank Rancho as a model for urban horsekeeping. The vision is the Burbank Rancho is a unique neighborhood characterized by long and ongoing tradition of urban equestrianism. For change and growth, the objective is to steer development into targeted areas to address gaps in community needs. This includes addressing concerns with housing development, especially in the city's response and strategy in responding to state law. The vision is that the Burbank Rancho will protect existing residential areas while allowing for the sustainable and strategic growth in other areas to allow cohesive balance between old and new. Citywide role. The objective is to clarify Burbank Rancho's role in achieving citywide goals, including but not limited to providing access to regional amenities like Griffith Park. The vision is the Burbank Rancho is a unique neighborhood which contributes to and supports the city of Burbank's overall vision and policy goals. And finally, identity. The goal is to sharpen and make resilient the Burbank Rancho neighborhood's identity. And the vision is that the Burbank Rancho is an equestrian neighborhood that protects, celebrates, and strengthens its unique identity for equestrians and non-equestrians alike. At this point, the project has completed Phase 1, discovery and analysis, and the first round of outreach. The project team now seeks feedback from the council on phase 1 of the project, including major emerging themes and objectives, and the project team's focus on equestrian safety as the guiding principle for the project. Based on phase 1, as well as council's input, the project team will develop project alternatives for the RNSP project, which will be presented to the public during phase 2 later this year. Future phases, which include the selection of a preferred plan and the release of a draft-specific plan, will occur in the first half of next year. The current tentative date for adoption of the specific plan is in the second half of 2027. Thank you. This concludes the presentation, and the project team is looking forward to discussion and any questions. And the project website is up on the screen, as well as the contact information for the project planners. Thank you.
Great, thank you for the presentation. Now it's time for council questions. Councilmember Perez, would you like to start?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, staff, for the presentation. Very thorough. I know we got a lot of great feedback from our community in sharing that they like the sessions and they look forward to more. So based on that, I just had a few questions. Looking at the crossings with the red stars, are we adding horse crossings there, or are we leaving that alone?
Thank you for the question. The idea is to identify the current existing conditions at this phase, and alternatives will be discussed in the next phase. So that will be one of the items that will be discussed with the community. How much interest is there in adding more crossings?
Okay.
Is this something that is feasible? And if it is, it would be then identified what the implementation strategy would look like.
And have we reviewed, or has there been any discussion about the length of crossing?
I'm sorry, the length?
So on the crossing, the number of seconds that folks get to cross the street.
Right. Yes. We did receive community feedback on the length of crossing, and that the timing can be improved.
Too short.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I wanted to make sure that was addressed. I did have a question about the historical designation conversation. A couple of residents have asked, did our consultants look at the Atwater Village Equestrian Historical District when assessing this, and how did that go?
Yes, the consultant did look at the regional rancho elements, so that would include the Glendale Rancho, the Equestrian Center, the Atwater District as well. And the conclusion was that at this point, the district does not qualify for historic designation based on the criteria and the national standards.
And can you explain, just in a summary, the reasons why, given that a lot of our residents are comparing it to Atwater, what distinguishes Atwater from us? Why don't we qualify?
Hi, good evening, Council. Amanda Landry, Principal Planner in CDD Planning. I think a lot of people in the community have brought up Atwater because they have some shared history in the Burbank Rancho with the regional context. While there's shared history, there's a difference in the built environment and what resources remain in Burbank for us to look at and evaluate in the context of whether or not anything we have in the city boundaries is eligible for historic designation. So while there's shared history, our physical environment is different. Changes have been made in Burbank that maybe haven't been made elsewhere that we have to take into consideration.
Thank you. And I asked both because I had the question, and also it's one of the main things I've heard from our residents, because you'd like to think that one is comparable to the other. Let's see. Oh, my other question is, when assessing, what were the dates for the bicycle, vehicle, and pedestrian? When was that done? And looking at AM, PM, we had some questions on whether or not they were done at comparable times.
I'll take that question. So the daily counts were conducted in the morning as well as in the afternoon. The morning counts were conducted, I believe it was, so from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. This was on a Wednesday in March. And then again from 4:30 to 7:30. And the graphics that you saw earlier, those represent the peak hour for the morning only. And the reason for that is those were more representative of the condition. So if there was more of an impact or more traffic during the morning hours, it's just a limitation of the presentation. Honestly, we do have the numbers for the evening counts as well, and they're comparable. They're very similar.
And did we look at weekends and weekdays?
Yes. So the weekend counts were conducted for the equestrian counts, and that is because those are the weekday counts were not revealing a lot of equestrian activity. So there was about a third of the number of crossings by horse during the weekdays, and so the recommendation from the consultant was to conduct another study during a weekend when school is back in session, folks are back in town, and so the count that you saw on the slide, that was a weekend count, and it was a peak hour on a Saturday, and I believe that was in August.
Okay.
Hopefully
Thank
that
you.
answers your question.
Thank you for that. I know
Thank you.
residents have questions, and I understand because you want folks to count really when the largest amount of people are there and when it's really representative, and the weekend is more representative when folks are crossing in that area. And then the last question I have, which is the million-dollar question from our residents, do we have a timeline on when the report will be available for the public?
Yes, so there are several reports that were used for the existing conditions. So there was the historic context statement. There are mobility reports with all the counts. So that information will be released with the release of the draft environmental impact report. So we're looking at probably early 2027, late 2026. So these are all working documents, and staff is still working out some kinks and making sure that all the work, all the analysis that we expect is being done.
Okay, thank you. And I hope that helps answer some of the questions that I received from community members via email and some of the conversations I had. I know my colleagues will have more. The only piece of feedback I will share is that I from at least my perspective, I hope to see the specific plan really address the issues we have at the bridge that is affecting our community, Glendale, LA, and it's the only crossing into Griffith Park. So I really would love to see that protected to the extent that we can. And now if you will all excuse me, I'm still a new mom, have to go pump.
Thank you for the questions, Councilmember. Vice Mayor Mullen, do you have questions?
Thank you. First, I want to commend staff for doing such a great job and the outreach that you have done for the community. Yes, Amanda, I can see you. You're leaning over there. In the emails that we have received and the phone conversations I personally had, they all praise really all of you for your work that you've done and the community outreach. So I do thank you, because this is part of why the process will become successful, and with the weigh-in from our community in that area. So I do want to ask a question, and we have received probably 3 very detailed questions that were asked in those emails, and they were very specific questions. And I want to know if staff will be responding to these emails. I know we're going to discuss a lot of them today, and some that you have already mentioned in your presentation, but there's a lot of other emails that, information that was requested from staff, like dates and time and when reports will be available. So I would appreciate it in advance if staff can compile something together and just send a response back in regards to those questions. I appreciate that. So one of the emails that we did receive really addresses the barn and permits for barns. And right now, what I read in the email, because we don't have a specific permit process for the barns, there seem to be some barns who are not permitted because there's no specific plan. Here's how you built the barn. And then earlier today, before our closed session, we had a speaker who also talked about ADUs right next to barns. Can you please talk to us a little bit about the permit process? What typically happens when someone comes in and applies for a permit for a barn?
Absolutely. The permit process for a barn is it's the same as any other structure. So you would have to get a building permit. We don't have a planning entitlement for equestrian facilities unless it's a commercial stable. So if it's a backyard barn, backyard stable, or a corral, that's just a building permit. The issue, I think, is the fact that some of these structures are very, very old. There are no clean records on file, and so folks are using them, and they present there's an asset to the community. So in order to register the horse, you have to actually show legal permits for that facility. So that's the challenge, and that's part of the reason why we don't have a good census of how many horses there are, because folks feel like they have to bring the facility up to maybe 2025 standards, and it's 60 years old. So that's something we're looking at, ways in which we can help to navigate that process for folks to make it easier to legalize what they already have and to make it clear what the future standards would be for new facilities. As far as the ADU concern is, I unfortunately don't have the context for the question, but there are standards in our current single-family zone regarding the distance separation between residential use and horse use, and it favors the residential use because if, let's say, you have a horse facility, a barn or a stable, and then you put an ADU within 5 feet, then you have to move the horse facility. So that's another thing we're looking at updating our standards that we have on the books as part of the next phase of the project.
Okay, that's excellent, because that seemed to have brought some concerns in the neighborhood, because there are people who did not, can't get a permit or are not counting in their horses, so we don't really have a good idea to the amount of horses that we have in the neighborhood. So I appreciate, and this is coming as a continuation in your research and community meetings. So this is going to be looking at future reports that you're going to be addressing, hopefully, with the community. Okay, thank you. Also, in a couple of the emails, and this is something I saw firsthand. I know we talk a lot about horses in the rancho, but we also have individuals that have donkeys, they have chicken, I've seen a whole bunch of other animals running around, which is very unique. That's why we call the rancho areas very unique. Is there a certain requirement or permitted process, or we just focus on horses and we don't look at all the other animals that are housed in that area?
Hi. Sorry. Good evening, Councilmember. So the Burbank Rancho has regulations that specifically address equine, horses, and members of the horse family. The city's BMC generally also covers regulations for chickens and other animals. So they're regulated separately from the rancho. It's more of a citywide regulation.
So am I allowed to have a donkey in my backyard? I live in the flatland area, so I'm just curious because they are sometimes housed in the rancho. So I know somebody's going to call the city on me if they see a donkey in my front yard. So how is that works?
The rancho regulations, again, are just for the horses and members of the horse family. So if a donkey falls into the horse family, then it would fall under those regulations. Otherwise, it's regulated separately under the Burbank Municipal Code.
Okay, that's interesting. I would appreciate staff looking a little further into that with the residents there, because there's special needs for additional animals that are housed in the rancho area, and it's normal to have them there. It's not gonna cause a phone call to the city and saying, I saw a donkey in somebody's front yard. So I appreciate if you guys have that on the radar, so we can look at it. I do want to talk about the trail. And I know in one of your slides, this is something that is going to be discussed and brought up in the future conversation with the community, because right now we have the trail that ends right by the school in front of the old Pickwick. And I know we've had many discussions here on council and from our residents attending the meetings, talking about the extension of the trail. And in reading the staff report, safety theme was really very high priority for the community. So can you share with us what is the plan to continue the trail? Are we having more dialogue with the community to see what they like to see and where it goes? Can you help us just cover the trail, please?
Absolutely. So the first phase was more of a discovery phase. So we were looking at existing conditions and looking at best practices. And what the best practices have shown is that more separation is better and safer. However, we do know there's a lot of interest in the community. There's some interest in the community to extend the trail further. That's something we'll look at in the next phase when we look at alternatives. It will be brought up and discussed in great detail with the community to just gauge the level of interest and how much support there is for such a trail. And if there is support for the trail, then we will look at the cost and practical implications of what that actually means, whether it's an implementation item, a program that would be added to the specific plan, or it would be left out.
And that would be coming back to council to let us know.
It will be coming back to council.
Okay,
Yes.
so first you're going to meet with the community, get their feedback, the priority, and looking at cost, and then bringing it back to us where the public can participate on your findings. And
Yes.
we can participate as well, because somebody has to approve that funding or approve something. Okay,
Yes.
great. I want to talk also about the historic preservation aspect of the whole neighborhood. I know that you mentioned as an entire rancho area that it didn't qualify for historic preservation. Can you just help us in case somebody doesn't really know what is historic preservation? What qualifies you or qualifies your individual house as a historic, under that category for historic preservation? And then I have a couple of questions to follow after that.
Yes, I can briefly go over the general requirements for designating properties as either individual historic resources or as part of a historic district. The city of Burbank has eligibility criteria that a property must meet in order to be even eligible for designation. And those are specified in our code, and they're aligned with the state and federal regulations. So we're consistent. And those typically are things related to association, if it's associated with a larger movement, if it's architecturally significant, if it's associated with a person of significance, or if there's archaeological resources that are significant on the property. And then once we determine that there's that eligibility criteria that's met, then we look at other aspects of the structure or the property. We look at what's left on the property. Is there enough left for it to convey that significance? So for a district, we'd have to have the majority of the structures within that boundary be intact enough to convey significance. So if they've been altered a lot over time, if homes have been improved upon, if they've had major alterations, the streetscape has changed, a lot of the commercial businesses have changed, that would mean that district, a possible district, wouldn't be intact enough, and it would not have enough remaining to be designated as a historic resource. So that's kind of the things that we studied as part of our historic context statement, like what's out there, what conditions in, is there any way we can associate it with any of these eligibility criteria? And thus far, our information is showing that there's a lot of individual properties that might qualify, but collectively as a district, there's been so much change over time that it might not have enough left to qualify to be designated.
Okay, so having a stable barn behind your house not necessarily qualifies you for a historic district or historic house?
No, just the presence of it wouldn't necessarily qualify because we'd have to look at the condition of those structures. If it's been upgraded over time, it's no longer reflecting its original historic condition. So it's lost its historic, they call it integrity.
Okay.
So,
But you do, the public needs to know that if someone decides they want to file, they can do that individually, or maybe 2-3 houses next to each other that feel they qualify. Is that correct?
yeah, we have in our code a process for designating either individual resources or districts. So any person or group of people could apply. They'd have to go through the established process as noted in the BMC. And then staff would help process that application, guide them through that process, and engage in a lot of the research and analysis for that.
Okay. In regards to submittal for additional information regarding the historical preservation, is the public still allowed to continue?
Absolutely,
Because-
yeah. We will
okay,
receive
'cause-
as much information as we can get.
Okay, because I was under the impression like the time frame has closed and they're not allowed to submit. So you're still open to
Yes.
have them submit. And that was one of the questions we're asked, when is the deadline or can you continue submitting?
Yeah.
Okay. And when, I had a question regarding the deadline. So there's going to be a draft. The draft report is, you kind of gave us a date, like 26, 27? Is that kind of give and take the year?
Yes, all the draft technical reports that we've mentioned in this study
Okay.
session would be made available upon release of the draft environmental impact report, which is towards the end of this year.
Okay, great. I'm going to stop now because I know the mayor has other questions and Councilmember Anthony, so thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Anthony, do you have any questions?
You need a permit to own a horse or house a horse?
Thank you for the question. The permit is to register a horse
That
at your
you're-
property, and
That it resides on the property.
That is contingent upon having a legal horse keeping facility.
Okay, so you need a permit to get a horse keeping facility, and that would show that you're able to legally house a horse, and then you can get a permit for the horse.
That is the current requirement. Yes, sir.
So I'm inferring from the data you've given here, you're saying that potentially there are people in this city who have a horse on their property that is not currently registered with the city.
It's very likely, and the reason is, one of the reasons is there are some requests for manure pickup at properties that do not have registered horse. So we know there is some inconsistency.
I mean, heck, manure could be from anyone. Okay, fair enough. I'm not going to speculate on who's going to whose house for manure. Okay. Is there anywhere else other than the bridge that is a designated historical site in the Rancho yet? Or is it just the bridge so far?
Just the bridge is a
Okay.
designated historic resource.
Okay. Designated historic reserve. And then I wasn't clear earlier. There was someone who made a public comment before we had this session, talking about their ADU having to move their barn. I know we touched a little bit on it. So, like, how could someone get confused about that? Like, where would somebody get that idea? Is that just reading the code wrong, or because I've never heard of that?
I can touch upon that. So the requirement currently is that if residential uses for human habitation take precedence. So you don't get the benefit of legal nonconformity for your stable. If you have a stable and then an ADU gets built right next to it, you would have to move
if
your
the stable
stable.
or the barn is non-conforming. If it's legal and there's a permit for it,
No, it's for all horse facilities, including legal ones. So basically the code does, right now it does not favor horse keeping facilities if a residential use goes into an adjacent or the same property.
is that specific issue being discussed as we're doing this specific plan?
Yes, we're looking into that and updating
Okay.
the standards to reflect the community's needs.
And then what is
And, best
potentially,
practices.
what do you, hypothetically, when this comes back to us, what would that new regulation look like?
It could look like a different buffer requirement, or perhaps the horse facility a legal one would be grandfathered in for wherever it is.
Okay.
We don't know yet. We're looking into that, so it's kind of,
Can I ask my
Yeah.
city attorney, is it,
You'll be deciding that when it comes to you.
okay.
So staff can't tell you what you'll decide
No,
when
no.
you see the plan.
I don't think that's my question. I think my question is, legally, I know, is there a state law, a federal law that says we have to take precedence over a new human building versus a horse building? Like,
Well, it's a complex topic because legally, the city must allow conversion of structures
Sure.
for ADUs. So it's something that staff will need to look at, and in
Okay.
development of the plan, they are aware that it's an issue.
so it
they'll
may
bring
be a
forward.
point of grandfathering in the buffer is, like you said, legal non-conforming, and it's just not up to code, but we allow it because it's grandfathered in. And so that might be a potential solve for that problem, is what you're saying?
we're looking at different options
Okay.
with our consultant.
Okay.
With their question experts, looking at best practices.
Okay.
And
I
it
think
will be
that was
brought
my
before
confusion.
before
Okay.
the council.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. So great job on this work, the completeness of the report, and also for really listening to the community. Based on the feedback we got, the community has reflected that they felt heard. There's still work to do, but they felt heard in the process, so thank you for that. Other council members asked most of my questions. I did have one question that hasn't been asked yet about the change in growth and steer development into targeted areas to address gaps in community needs for housing. So for housing and targeted residential strategic growth, what is generally the approach you're looking at now, both for collecting data and looking at and how to get feedback and information about how to balance, like you said, the old and the new in a way that the community appreciates or can tolerate, if that's the case?
Absolutely. So as you well know, that state law requires us to have certain standards, so we cannot reduce density in neighborhoods. There's a no net loss provision that we have to put density somewhere. So the idea is to identify together with the community the most appropriate and fitting areas within the neighborhood where any residential growth can go. We have heard that the commercial corridor approximately at the intersection of Alameda and Main Street is probably the more appropriate part of the neighborhood. But we're looking at that. So the alternatives will be presented to the community. We'll get more feedback, and then will be presented back to the council. And the options will be presented as well. So but there may be 2 or 3 different levels of intensity or locations, zoning designations, and so forth.
Great, thank you. I wanted to make sure we covered that. So, and then really quick clarification question about moving horse facilities if an ADU is built. Does a horse facility on a neighboring property have to be moved to, or just on your own property?
Yes. So at the moment, it does not have to be on the same property.
Wow, so a neighbor has to move their horse facility if another neighbor builds an ADU? According to our
It's not
current-
just an ADU. So any
Or any human
residential
residential.
occupancy, yeah, that
Okay.
is the current standard on the books.
Yeah.
It's in the zoning
That's
code.
That's messed up.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so thank you so much for all that, answered my questions. I'm really interested in seeing if we can expedite the process of getting those barns permitted and horses permitted, not waiting until 2027 to work on that if we can. Also, looking at those standards for moving horse facilities when ADUs are built, again, getting ahead of that and not waiting until the study's done. And I'm also interested in the animal regulations and seeing if we can get that up to date so that we can get kind of everything up to date in the area. And we're looking at accurate data. And then that way too, when we're presented, we don't have to change something at the last minute because we don't know the numbers or the numbers change. So I know that you have a lot on your plate as you're looking through this, but if we can expedite some of these before the finalization of the plan, that'd be amazing. Thank you. It's a great job. Keep up the good work and keep listening to the community and hearing the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will take, I know we're running a little bit behind 6, apologies for running a little late, but we will take a 5-minute break so we can run to the restroom and breathe a little bit, and we'll be back. Yeah, we will be back at 6. I'm told I have to be exactly 5 minutes, so what's at 6:12? 6:12, exactly.